Thank you for being here and sticking around for a moment and putting lunch off for a minute. There's a whole group of people. Donald, his part of it will tell you who the group that's kind of been working on part of this planning and who they are. And I want to get into a little bit. We're hoping to go about 30 minutes. And that way, if you need to move on to something, you will be able to. If you have questions, we want to try to take questions at the end so that we can just walk through what we're doing. And there are going to be questions because we're still in the middle of the process in many ways. But as far as planning goes, we've set some good plans for us. So if you have a question, write it down if you can, or remember it, save it to the end, and stick around and answer questions for a period, but it'll allow you to move on if you need to, if you're on a schedule. Okay, let's open with a word of prayer, and then we'll kind of start talking together about our plans. So let us pray. Gracious God, this was a fun morning. Lots of song and music, and just enlivens us to who you are and whose we are. And this is a great congregation, wonderful people, part of this church. And I don't know where you found them, but I'm glad they're here. And I am certainly deeply blessed to be serving as the pastor of Canyon Creek, and we ask your blessing upon the chapters that unfold as they come, all the things you have in store for us. We're going to talk a little bit about a piece of that today as we walk into the future together. Bless our time and the spirit in which we enter it, in Christ's name. Amen. Okay. There's a big part of this. The Jubilee Fund is a big part of what Dawn's going to talk about, and I want to kind of give you an idea of the process that's come about and unfolded as we began. I mean, we always have our stewardship time at the end of the year. Stewardship is year-round, but we focus heavily on that, and particularly on financial stewardship at the end of the year as we roll into the new year, and plan and budget and all of that good stuff. And as the Jubilee Fund started to get together, the group that was kind of going to plan some of that, as we got into the year and about the summertime, we started to realize that if we're going to do this, the timing was looking like they would both be so close together that we didn't want one to trump the other. And in conversation, really, it just kind of progressed this way. The thought came about, well, why don't we just do them together? And let's put everything out before the congregation as much as we can, and talk about these two things together. One being the annual giving, and the second, of course, being this, the 50th anniversary of the Jubilee Fund, and what those are, and trust that the congregation will understand what we're doing. And there's always a risk when you run two things at the same time. So we've had a lot of conversation about that, and felt confident in the end to partner them. And so that's why we're doing this gatherings way of getting at it. And so what I want, we've already done that part. We really, it's funny when you start doing that and you got this packet in the mail. We've tried to be very careful about the look of things, in that there's this tan kind of color to the annual giving, and this blue kind of thing with the Jubilee Fund, we worked really hard to keep the look of them separate and alike to one another so that it wouldn't be confusing. So I hope that was obvious when you got this letter in the mail with these two brochures and this pledge card and all that. But if not, there's the explanation. But that's what we're up to. 2014 annual giving and the Jubilee Fund all at the same time. Don's going to talk about the Jubilee Fund. I'm going to go through our annual giving, and I'm going to say some things that I've been saying since August, really. And we'll just kind of look at that. Now's the time is a phrase that also came up in conversation, and it just popped out there, and one of the members of the committee said, well, he said, I had this dream the other night. And of course we went, oh, really, a dream? He said, I feel like now's the time. And the phrase, he just kind of threw it out there. And for some reason, it just stuck. And we all kind of nodded. And there is that sense in this church. There is a wonderful energy in the life of this congregation right now that has not dissipated since my coming here, at least, if not always been. And it hit. Now's the time. And it just, for better or worse, that became the phrase. So we've walked around that a little bit, and I've tried to kind of organize it informationally, and so we kind of put it in 3 categories, and the first one is community. Now's the time for community. And the first thought around that is Sunday worship and involvement. In August, and y'all have known Stacy longer than I have, but in August, on kickoff Sunday, I came into the church, and after 9 o'clock service, she runs up to my office, and I'm, getting done with 9, and she had already done some rounds and walked around, and she grabs me and she says, "You've got to come see this." And she just has this big smile on her face. I said, okay. And she walks me down to the first floor. And she says, "Look at how many people are here. We have not had this many people on a Sunday morning since I can remember." And she said, "But wait." And she took me to the second, and we just walked around the building. And she herself says, well, numbers aren't everything, but there was such a joy about her, but about the life of the church that day. And we talked about it, and we said, well, what is it? What was it that had our numbers so high, and our involvements, attendance and classes were the highest we've had in 7 years. And we said, well, we kind of talked about kickoff Sunday. That's always a big Sunday, and it's just bigger this year. Well, Easter was also larger than last year, just by attendance. We said, yeah, and that's great. Let's keep going with that, but we know it'll probably kind of drop back down to a norm. Well, it actually did. It stayed fairly high. And there is a level of involvement and participation in this congregation right now that's at the highest it's been. And I've not only heard about this church from that place, but also from visitors. And I asked them, if I get a chance, and I'm not going to, berate them, but if they visit and I get a moment with them that I feel like is a good, honest moment, I'll ask them, I want to know what you really think when you have visited this church. I want to really know. I need to know if there's something missing. And the things they have said in the couple of times have all been the same. They've said, we've visited places, and there is something very spiritual and enlightening about this church. And, you can talk about how pastors lead worship and all of that. That's part of it, I know. And Stacy and I are enjoying working together, and I know that says something and communicates at some level. But that's you all. That's more you all. You can have wonderful leadership, but if the congregation is not excited, then there's really not much. And that's what I've heard from visitors. And that says a lot. That says a lot. And I think has been feeding. I think that's God's word. But I wanted to highlight that. Another thing is women's and men's ministries are just taking off. They're kind of competing a little bit. Well, we're doing this, well, we're going to do this. Kind of fun. But they're just they're taking off. They're growing. Small groups, we've had the largest number of upstart small groups this year than we've had in a while. And they're really wonderful groups. I mean, not just, they're really hitting it off well. Our middle school, our children, I just wanted to highlight a couple of these things. High school, they have more involvement this year and more excitement this year about what's coming next and future things. Very excited about that. I just keep hearing, and you saw what in worship this morning, if you were at 11, the high school choir. It's just unbelievable. And choir. In a day and age when you kind of go, well, choir's kind of, that's old-timey, right? And yet we have these wonderful kids, and they get it. And that's what I hear not only from our youth people and our children's people, but from parents. They get it. And they get it at a level that they understand the importance of singing in relation to their faith, for example, amongst other things. And want to do Bible study. You guys wouldn't believe they want to do Bible study. I mean, sometimes you got to pull IDs just to get them into open a Bible. That's not the case with our group. They are interested. And I just happened to step into a middle school deal one night, and I mean, they're all sitting around the table, and they've got their Bibles open, and they're like this. I mean, they are studying Scripture together, and they want to know what I think. And I mean, I've shared stuff with them that sometimes goes over the heads of adults, and they're just like, yeah, and it's, source criticism. I've done some of that with the youth. And if you don't know what that means, it's okay, because it's not that big a deal. But they were just all over it and got what that meant spiritually. It's not just academics. That's the thing that, obviously I could go on forever. Prayer is becoming more and more central, and this is a slow thing, but I believe it to be a grassroots kind of thing. I mean, we certainly have a group of people in this congregation that it is their call to help us pray more often and more deeply together. And they are committed to helping us do that. And you're seeing signs of that in different ways. We've done some services that have been strictly focused on prayer. And amongst other things, prayer to go at 10:30 on Sunday mornings. If you've forgotten about that, that's still happening. And things like that. And it's the spirit of not being discouraged if the continuing to try spirit is a part about the energy of this congregation. The takeaway from this is, obviously, God is actively involved with us and deeply involved with us on a communal level. The next little word is compassion. And we pulled out a couple of bullet points. One is giving. And we've been looking at all expenses, not just budget. And that I'm going to show a pie chart in a second, and I want to make sure you understand that that's what that is. Budget is a big part of our financial obligations. But there's other things that are inclusive in that, and we didn't want to overshadow those. That's where we get this number, mission giving and special offerings. That's budget giving, and in addition to that is more than $100,000 annually. Music, children, youth, small, they all have a mission component to their ministries. You heard about one talking about CIA, if you understood the video, is Children in Action. That's a missional component to the children's ministries and how much, and he gets it. C.J. Williams, he gets it. Operation Inasmuch, obviously a huge outreach, continues to be so. What's something that is fairly new is kind of a re-energizing of our international partnerships. We did have an ongoing ministry in Mexico, and where we're pushing now is more overseas and trying to build relationships, particularly in Malawi, obviously. I mean, Villages in Partnership is one of the groups that we are working with. Solar Under the Sun is another one, and that is a denominational effort that is not only there, but in Haiti and other places. Why there? Malawi, in particular. One, it is arguably and often ranked as the poorest place on earth. It is also stable and fairly safe. So that allows us to be able to feel comfortable going there while also meeting one of the deepest needs on the planet. So if you ever wonder why Malawi as opposed to Bangladesh or other places, that's why. And we look forward to a growth there. The deacons have broadened their discipleship of care. Our whole time could be spent on this. The deacons are awesome, and you just have, I hope you have gained a sense of that at some level. If you haven't, I'm telling you. I mean, they're all over it. And when someone needs care, we just send out an email, and it is, Katie bar the door. We have to tell them to stay back. Almost. It's a really wonderful piece that has helped not only Stacy and I and Ellen in our work, but made it much more deeply meaningful for the families that need it. Take away, obviously, Christ has put compassion on our hearts, and it continues to grow. Okay, the last piece, and then I'm going to turn it over to is commitment. And resiliency is a word that has come up in describing this congregation. You're a resilient group. And those of you who've been here a long time know what that means. And if you haven't been here a long time, I'm sure you'll find out at some point what resilient means in a congregation. Every church needs resiliency with its members. I mean, if you don't weather some storms together, then what's the point of being together, really? If everything's just hunky-dory and wonderful all the time, then that's not true relationship, right? You're truly a resilient congregation. You get it. You get that when we talk about things and needs in the church, that it's tied to our faith in Jesus Christ. Another piece I wanted to mention is the more people, the more involvement means more programming, even without creating something new. And that's somewhat unglamorous because you say, well, what are you doing new? Well, not much. In one sense, a lot of things. But in another sense, we're continuing to grow what we are doing. And that means more things, but also more need, and more need for financial support. And I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. God blesses this church through the commitment of every single one of you. One of the things that I have continued to learn here is how much you need to hear that your peace, whether it be financial, time, energy, all of those, it is not insignificant. Your peace is vital. It's vital. I hope I never have to hear someone say, well, I can do this, but I know it's not that much. I'll say, well, that's not true. It's everything to me. And, if you're saying that because you feel like you need to do more, let that be a good motivator maybe, but don't cripple you. Don't let that cripple you. Because it's ultimately untrue. Your peace is vital. And certainly there are members of the church that can do more financially than others. There are members of the church that can do more with their time than others. And I believe and trust that you give in the ways that you feel led and able to do, and that is a spiritual discernment thing. Okay, I'm almost up with my 15 minutes. Where does our money come from? This is a brief snapshot. This just gives you an idea of where the breakdown is. Pledged gifts means that you pulled out a card and you wrote a number, said I plan to give this much. Unpledged gifts means you didn't do that, but give. And either give regularly or as you can, depending on how you, different ways of how you make your income. I mean, if you're on commission, you don't know until you make it, and that's part of it. So, but it's about an even breakdown. The other income, 1%, is like summer camp tuitions and stuff like that helps us a little bit. North Star is not included in this because the main deal is it's almost an in and out with North Star, no matter the number. We're always working that, and that's not completely true, but it's close enough to be able to say, for reporting purposes, it doesn't really need to be in here. This is a snapshot of all expenses, not just budget. And you can tell by this, and it's also time allocation. call it a narrative budget. And so we ask staff to allocate their time by percentage, and that factors into this. So obviously education and worship are two heavy pieces, and you'll find this to be true in most congregations. One of the ones that I want us to certainly continue to work on is the missional piece. And I think it'd be good for us to push ourselves to grow that as an overall percentage of the pie. But that's just a brief breakdown. It gives you an idea of where it goes. Okay. What else? This one is a interesting graph. We started doing this year. We've always had the ability. We've never looked at it this way. This is the trend. It's the rhythm of giving. And it also gives an average in the red line. This just takes the past couple of years. We can go back 10 more, but it gets a little crazy to look at all the lines on there and you kind of lose perspective. What this shows is we start off on a higher note, and then you can always see Easter. This is Easter. The big spike is Easter. So you can tell where Easter falls. And then we kind of ride low for a while, and we dip. This is summer. Right about summertime, we really dip low. And it's just patterns of giving. But this is the deal, is the last month. It's not the last 2 months. What this shows us is we depend heavily, like most operations, nonprofit or profit alike. Financially, we depend heavily on the last 2 months of the year. And it's a real nail biter sometimes because we've made this plan and we try to, more and more in the coming years, we're trying to build up our cash base so that we can make it through the summer for the sake of getting through the last piece. But November and December are always big times and we depend on it. So when you're asking yourself, well, you know, I'd like to, no, you're giving in December and November, big deal, makes a big difference. One of the things that I'm hopeful in this year is, since we had a much better Easter than we've had in the past, one thing that might say is, maybe we'll have a little better Christmas as well, but don't know, that's no magic 8-ball. But that just kind of shows you the pattern, and most churches follow a similar pattern. This is not uncommon, this is in fact normal. You know, in other words, if everybody gave their entire year's worth in January, we'd have this straight up line and then nothing, you know, and then, you know, we wouldn't worry, we'd always have a surplus because we just had it all. But we can't do that. I can't, I know, so. But that gives you an idea. So one thing you can learn from this is if you can boost your giving in the summer, it helps the church for sure, just from the cash perspective. So that's a. If you have any questions about all that, we can ask it. Okay, Jubilee Fund, that's Don. And I'll turn it over to him.
Andy's taking this community thing seriously. He's consumed both cups, I think. Thank you for being here, but first of all, I wanted to start out what a day it was in worship today with the new hymnals and all the music that we did. I just kind of reiterate what Andy had said. I need to put that on. Good, I can move now. And because of that, I thought that from here on out, what we'll do, and the rest of this presentation we'll talk about, this will just be Andy and Don the musical. Stay your seat. That's an idle thread. I get to talk about the Jubilee Fund, and this is really, for me, this is a lot of fun. This is things that we recognize around this church that need fixing, and we get to challenge you and encourage you to contribute to this thing that we're going to call the Jubilee Fund. Now, there's a the passage here from Leviticus that's in here, and Andy gets to do the opening prayer and do some churchy things, and not coming up here and asking you for money. Not that that's not a churchy thing, but I wanted to do a churchy thing as well. And so I want to read this passage of Leviticus, because this has been an inspiration to us as we've gone through all of the Jubilee campaign that we've done, as far as the celebrations and then the Jubilee Fund as well. So sanctify, this comes from Leviticus 25, verse 10. And on beyond that. So sanctify the 50th year, make it holy, proclaim freedom over all the land to everyone who lives in it, a jubilee for you. Each person will go back to his family's property and reunite with his extended family. The 50th year is a jubilee and a holy year for you. You can see, even back in biblical times, this 50th year was such a celebration that they carved out a time back in those days to celebrate 50 years. So we're in the midst of our Jubilee, of celebrating our 50 years, and you've experienced some of the celebration already. And for us, we get to stand on the shoulders of these folks who have come before us, and celebrate what they did to set this up what we call Canyon Creek Presbyterian Church. And you all are part of those 50 years, and so we are on their shoulders, but as well we are shoulders for others to stand on in the future. Now, we look around this building and we think of this place as, we just think of this as a new building, like it's brand new to us. In truth, this thing is 10 years old. And so what we've got around here is that we have things that need to be fixed, and things that just need to be replaced, and new things that we need to have happen. And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about the Jubilee Fund, is that things have changed, we've grown, we've made a few changes, and so we've got to take care of these implications that we have for the future. So we gathered, and Andy kind of went through this, that we gathered together and we talked about the Jubilee Fund. And I want to, before I talk about the goal and all of that and the actual money, I want to give credit to some people who serve on the Jubilee Fund committee. There are two Jubilee committees, and one of them is the fellowship committee, and the other and they're the ones that set up that party that we had back in September. And then there's a Jubilee Fund committee, and these are the people that have set up this program of the Jubilee Fund. And I want to read these names, if I can do it. So we've got, and on this committee, people have devoted a lot of time, a lot of effort to this. We have Kim Banks and Jerry Dalton and John Engel, Kim McClure, Andy Odom, Herb Reed, Jerry Sanders, and myself that fit on this committee. So we have set up a goal of $500,000 for the Jubilee Fund. And so what happened with that, we took that as a goal that we could accept, because we felt like it's a challengeable goal to the congregation. It's something that we can challenge you. It's not an easy goal, but it's a doable goal. It's something that we acknowledge that we can actually come to grips with, and actually come and make that goal happen as we go through this. So let me tell you a little bit about what, as part of that goal, is that this is, compared to the annual giving campaign, which is a one-year campaign, we've set up the Jubilee Fund to be a two-year campaign. So it's going to run starting right now and continue through 2015. And so it's really 2 years of program, maybe a little bit longer than 2 years for your pledge to operate for the Jubilee Fund. And yet it's, for you tax accountants, that's 3 years of 3 tax years that you can devote your giving to. So that's kind of where we've gone with the Jubilee Fund in the 24 months, which is a little bit longer than 24 months. But so the challenge is for the $500,000 that we have. And so we're going to talk about a few of the projects. I'm going to lift up some of the projects. All 7 of these projects that I'm going to lift up to you were things that we talked about in the letter that was sent to the congregation. We sent these projects out. And so there were 7 projects that we listed that we talked about. I'm going to put them all, well, the 5 that we have here, I'm going to put those up and then we'll talk about 2 others. But we have things that we are lifting up to you to discuss. These are all come from a list, and let me describe to you a little bit about the project and how the list worked. The list is a challenge, and the list is a one sheet of paper with budgeted items on it where the session and the staff came together to decide what it is that we could do to improve the building and do this sort of extreme makeover that we could do for Canyon Creek. Several of the items listed are here. We have signage, and I'll talk about these individually. The front steps, the sanctuary balcony, the audio-visual systems in the sanctuary, and a rework of the children's area right down the hall here. There's a mission component, and then what we of the Jubilee Fund have come to call the Jubilee Garden, and that's the big thing that we want to talk about. And so I'm holding that one off to the end. So first of all, let's talk about. I'm going to pick some of these off of this list, and part of the reason we picked these is so I can show you pictures of these, but a couple of them I don't have pictures of, because you're so familiar with them. Let's talk about the audio-visual system in the sanctuary up there. People pick seats in that sanctuary because they think they can hear in that spot. You sit in in a lot of churches, you sit in somebody's seat and they correct you for sitting in that seat, and it's because they just are comfortable in that spot. For here, it really means something. I can hear what's going on because that's where I sit. And so you sit in my seat, I can't hear if I got to move. So it's this audiovisual system that we have has some problems, and we've known about these problems. We tried to fix this at one point. We put those speakers up front. Now there are some better solutions. It's 10 years. Things are different. There are solutions. We've identified solutions, and we can fix this sound system. That's going out on a limb, but sound systems in churches are notorious for being. When Satan got run out of the Garden of Eden, he went in a church sound system. That's where he was. So we have that sound system. There's also the visuals. When we put visuals up in the sanctuary, we put them up on those white walls. When Susan Cuellar this summer did a Sunday school class, and she did this thing by projecting on Christian art. She did this by projecting images up on the white wall. Kim Banks took over and put all those images and things onto Facebook, so we could actually see them on our smartphones and iPads, and people were sitting there while Susan was talking and waving through their smartphones and iPads just to be able to see them. You lose a lot when we project up on that wall. There's better ways to do this, and there's solutions for that. Let's take the children's area down the hall here. Children's Committee has a great idea. They want to take, at the end, there's a breezeway that's right out here on the other side of this playground. And I didn't know what the breezeway was because there's no breeze because it's all glassed in. But they have this area that we call the breezeway that's down this hall here. And at the head of the breezeway, what they want to do is take a couple of classrooms, knock a wall out, make one big gathering area. And in that gathering area is the welcome area, which is, by the way, a word I forgot to mention. All of these projects have something to do with welcome as we talk through it, and I'm going to try to highlight that. But as you go through that, as you would bring your child in the morning for Sunday school, you would take them and put them into that, take them to that gathering area at the front of the breezeway here. Everybody would gather together, all the children together, a community of the children, a community of the parents. Everybody comes together in one place. They have their worship, and then they take off and go to their respective Sunday school classes. Great idea. Part of the project is to get in there and knock a wall down. I guess we need professionals to do that. Okay, so now I can actually show you some pictures of the rest of these. These are the front steps. This is our front door. Let's talk about welcoming. We have on that front steps where the surface is chipping, there's these white rails that we put up. Originally, the front step was just blank. There was nothing there, nothing to hold on to. You were on your own to crawl up the front steps, and then we decided we put some rails on there. Then we had to put these little blocks on to keep skateboarders from coming down those rails for their recreation. There's better things to do. And so we would like to get, and part of the Jubilee Fund is to get a project to resurface those steps. We're working with consultants to figure out how to do that, and do that in a permanent manner. Talk about the balcony railings, and I'm only putting this picture in there because it's a picture of my daughter's wedding, and I want you to see this. But if you sat in the balcony, I mean, I was up in the balcony today, sitting up there today. That front rail is a little low. It causes people a little bit of concern when they have their kids up there. I didn't see any kids on the front row today in the balcony, but it causes, because when they get up and move around, it's a little low. It's not as tall. It meets code. It's fine. I was very comfortable up there in the balcony when I sat up there today, but then I wasn't flailing around like a little kid. But there are possibly some better things that we can do. The reason that balcony rail, that front edge of the balcony is low is for vision, to see what's going on down at the pulpit and what they're doing down front when the kids sing and the choirs come in and the sermons are done. All of that stuff is so that they have vision of that. We could either do something with that front rail, or we could raise the level of the front of the sanctuary. Either of those could accommodate that. So there are some solutions for the balcony railings, signage. Let's talk about welcome here. When we talk about what we'd like to do with the signage is new monuments. This is an example of, this is basically a drawing on top of our old monument, but we're working with the branding consultants who have, in essence, picked these colors, and so much of what you see around the building and our paperwork and everything all comes from this branding consultant. So it's a one stream, one common thread that runs through this. We're working with them to come up with some help with signage. We'd like for people who drive by here to know what this place is, that it's a Presbyterian church. We'd like for them to know what's going on here. Is there something going on of interest for them as they come here today? And so we'd like for that welcome to be available. As you walk into this church, if you're a visitor, you all probably know everywhere around this church. I bet you don't know where all the bathrooms are. You may not even know where the chapel is, which is down at the end of the hall. It took me 6 months to know where that was. So there's places around this church you may not know about, even as longtime members. Think of a visitor. As a visitor comes to this church and they come up to our front door, that's the expected entrance. You come up to that, what I just showed you with those chipped steps, that's our front door. If you're on a walker, you're in a wheelchair, you're just tired, that's a little daunting. It may not occur to you to move to the north side of the church and enter through there. I mean, there's a covered area. It could be pretty obvious, but there's no sign out there that says that there's another entrance over it that way. If you're bringing your children in for Sunday school, you don't want to go up those steps. You want to go to the left of those steps and come in here through the breezeway and enter into the children's area. So once you're in the building, we want to advance the signage so that people know where they're supposed to go, what the things that they can do. We have a mission component that we are including in the Jubilee Fund. We want to take at least 10% of the Jubilee Fund and present that to the Mission Committee with a challenge to the Mission Committee of use that money to expand God's Word. Expand the knowledge of the Lord and do what we do in mission and do so well in this church. It's an opportunity for them to expand and expand the mission that we have in this church. Idea of that as well is that gets expanded through the Jubilee Fund. It gets to be even a bigger culture in this congregation, that we have even better and more mission as we go through from the Jubilee Fund. If you think about this church and mission and what's involved in mission, I mean, even the architecture of this church represents mission. When you walk in and when you drive by this church at night, what's the most visible aspect of this church? Maybe the cross that's shining up there, but probably that atrium, the lights shining out of the atrium. If there's something going on here, that atrium is open So it's for people to look in. It's for us to look out. All of that image about mission is part of the architecture of this church as well. So we're gonna challenge the mission committee with that. Finally, the last thing I want to talk about is the Jubilee Garden. And this is the thing that I get most excited about when we talk about the Jubilee Fund, is the Jubilee Garden. This is an area that we have in mind that's going to be out on the, beneath the cross on that side of the sanctuary. We're not exactly certain exactly where, but originally we thought it would be right under the cross, and we would put it there. We're again working with some consultants to work through this. We look at this as the Jubilee Garden as a place for meditation. If you walk around the church, there's a lot of white walls, a lot of stark white walls. This is a place where you can go. Benches, shrubbery, so it's a nice place to go and sit, meditate, think about what the Lord has planned for us. We plan on having a labyrinth in the garden floor. And then a columbarium up, probably in the wall right up against the cross, and so we want to have that out there as well. If you think about what all of this, the impact of the Jubilee Garden, Andy talked last week about the saints. And we talked about, and so here we are building a place of solitude, a place for meditation, a place for worship, a place for study, a place where you just go and be with remembrances of those saints. We have a columbarium. We'll have stones that can be purchased and put on the floor that you can that will have people's names for remembrance. So there is a place for meditation and work with a reminder of the saints who have come before us. This is a picture of the consultants. This is not ours. This is a picture that the consultants have done of a similar type of garden where they have worked through this, and this is the kind of thing that we have in mind, but having it underneath the cross out here, the shrubbery, the labyrinth on the floor, the benches. You can take Sunday school classes out there, and a place for worship and a place for study. So that's the idea. This is all a challenge to you of the Jubilee Fund. This is what we have as far as the $500,000 and what we have in mind. We have plenty of other items that we're going to talk about that we have that are on the list. And so let's talk a little bit about the process and what we've done as far as where the Jubilee Fund is going to go. So who's going to allocate the money, and how are we going to allocate the money for once it's collected as far as what project comes on first? So the session has the overall responsibility to do this. It will be informed by the Property and Maintenance Committee is the plan that we have for the session to allocate the funds. We're the Jubilee Fund Committee. We don't want that part. That's the session's responsibility to allocate the funds as to when they occur. There's going to be projects that can happen immediately. There's painting projects on the list. There's furniture purchases on the list. There's things that can happen right off the bat, and we'll have those things happen. We'll inform you that those things are being done. There are bigger projects that are going to have to wait. The steps are going to have to wait a little bit. The balcony's going to have to wait a little bit. The audiovisual could, because we're not going to spend money until we have the money. So we're not going to step out and spend money that we don't have as we go through the Jubilee Fund, so you can be assured of that. So the session will manage it, and we as a Jubilee Fund will inform you when things have happened. You'll probably see them happen. I expect that Jubilee Garden will take a while to get going. It'll take us a while to get enough money to break ground on that, because that's not a simple project. There's landscaping and so forth. So, all that said, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to come up and talk to you a little bit about the Jubilee Fund and the plans that we have for you, and I'm going to turn it back over to Andy.
Okay, just a couple more things. We went a little bit over, but that happens on the first round. One concern we have, I've already kind of half mentioned it at the beginning, is, and we've talked about this fairly fairly in-depth. And that is that, when you get a card like this, and it has two things on it, what's the priority? And we all agreed in the planning phase that the priority is annual giving. That has to happen. And here's what we don't want. We do not want someone taking a part of what they would give for the annual operations and ministries and placing it and putting it to the project of like the Jubilee Fund. That would hinder the life of the church, and we just don't want that at all. And my charge to people, if they've asked or if I've had a moment to, is to say, if you are in a financial place where what you can do is continue to give annually like you have, and you really cannot give more in another place, don't do it. Do not take from the left side and give to the right side of this card. That's not what we want. And so I would be remiss if I didn't share that, and that's the consensus of the group by far. We want the church ministries to continue to flourish and to continue to grow and to continue to do what we do so well. So that was one concern we had. I also thought that it might be helpful. Pastors don't often get the chance to do this, and what I'm about to share. And I see myself and my family as one of you all in this deal. I am standing up and talking about it. But when it comes to our place and what I do, I see myself as one of you. And what my wife and I did, and what we typically do, is when it comes to things like this, is we sit down and we talk about it, and we I consider it kind of a form of prayer. It has a conversational style. What do we think we can do? What do we want to do? We want to be part. It's a great church. We want to help it. How do we do it? What do we think? What do we want to give? What can we give to the annual gift? What can we do for this? And we did that this last week. And it's funny. Usually when we do it, this isn't always true, but it did happen this time. We both thought pretty much the same thing. And what we're in our discernment with what we're able to do is to add some to our annual giving, but also to give a decent gift to the Jubilee Fund. And I know by saying that if we can do that, it requires some adjustment for us. As a pastor, I make a really good salary as a pastor. But we have 2 kids. But for us, it requires an adjustment. And we're going to have to watch ourselves. And I only share that because I see us as a part of this congregation in that way. In that way, I don't see myself as the lead pastor or the senior pastor. I see us as one of you all and part of this. And I simply share that just to give you a perspective on how we have done this as a family. And for no other reason than that. And I hope that that's helpful to you, because one of the things that we struggle with as a society is to talk about money, even in our own families. But it's a big spiritual part. It can hinder our spirituality, and it can help our spirituality become more healthy.